Hello and welcome to Dark Tower YouTube, where we're doing a deep psychological dive into Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. My name is Michelle McEwen. I am your host, and we are here for our first episode, The Gunslinger. Chapter 1 is what we will be reviewing and talking about today. So this is a book club in which we're looking at this book through, of course, a literary angle because it's a book and a book club, but we're taking special interest in psychological aspects, spiritual aspects, metaphysical aspects, and anything like that because I am a counselor. I am a very spiritual person and I like to look at life in that philosophical way and start psychoanalyzing everything and everyone, and we're going to do that with this book. We're going to put ourselves in the shoes of our characters. We're going to ask ourselves some deep questions, reflecting back what the characters are going through. So I hope you are into that. Go watch the introduction if you haven't already to get more of an idea of what we're doing here on this channel that makes this show different from other Dark Tower podcasts and shows. We're going to jump right into it. I don't like a lot of upfront chatter. I would like to know who you are, so tell me in the comments if you're here and you liked The Gunslinger and you liked this week's reading and whatever you want to tell me about yourself. I'm very happy to hear from you and make friends. This show, we're going to meet our protagonist, but we're not given his name for quite some time. We're firmly entrenched into our setting, which is a desert-like wasteland in which the world has apparently moved on. And we get a story within a story within a story within a story. That's right, we're going 4 flashbacks deep as we read chapter 1. The first sentence of chapter 1 is amazing. So we're going to take some time and read that and think about it. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Mic drop. Boom. That's a great opening sentence. Anyone who says Stephen King is not a good writer, I just give you Exhibit A there. We have our protagonist, our antagonist, our setting, and our action. And I'm immediately hooked. I want to know who are these people and why and where are they going, and it's great. It's such a great hook. It gets me every time, and it wins for best opening sentence ever. Do you have any others that you like more? I would love to hear them, and I will debate with you why this one's better. As we meet our protagonist for the first time, Stephen King writes, "The gunslinger had been struck by a momentary dizziness, a kind of yawing sensation that made the entire world seem ephemeral, almost a thing that could be looked through." Yeah, we're having this kind of altered state of consciousness feeling because we're in this vast, sun-glared wasteland where nothing is growing, and we're feeling that kind of dreamy, hazy thing that our protagonist is also apparently feeling. King writes, "He had progressed through the Kef over many years and reached perhaps the 5th level. Had he been a Mani holy man, he might have not even been thirsty. He could have watched his body dehydrate with clinical detached attention, watering its crevices and dark inner hollows, only when his logic told him it must be done. He was not a Mani, however, nor a follower of the man Jesus, and considered himself in no way holy. He was just an ordinary pilgrim, in other words, and all he could say with real certainty was that he was thirsty." So the Kef, what is the Kef? When we're just looking at the context here, it does feel like it has some kind of spiritual, systematic meaning. So any tradition where there are levels that you're ascending to, enlightenment being we're pure consciousness in the God state, and the lowest level being we're just humans who have no understanding of anything outside of our 5 senses. And the 5th level is where I'm able to back away from my body enough to say that I can walk through the desert. I can walk through the desert, but I'm thirsty. So that's where our protagonist is. I want to share a little bit more about Kef because it is something that we will hear about again. And it is a theme that I want us to be aware of as we're reading. There is an official Stephen King dictionary for terms like this that he made up for the Dark Tower or pulled from. We'll talk about that. I don't want to read all of it to you. I don't suggest that you go looking up these words because there are spoilers as you read through the definition of these words. So I'm going to share what I'm going to share without spoiling anything for you, just to open up the door for paying attention for when this comes up again. Literally speaking, Kef means the sharing of water. It also implies birth, life force, and all that is essential to existence. Kef can only be shared by those whom destiny has welded together for good or ill. In other words, by those who are ka-tet. Now, ka-tet is underlined as a separate entry. We haven't seen that in the text yet, so I'm not going to talk about that. But just to say that Kef, the sharing of mind, the sharing of life force between people that we're bound by destiny with, that's cool. That's big. All that is essential to existence. Well, that's everything. That's making me think of physics and dark matter. And what is the thing that binds the entire universe together? Well, Stephen King says it's Kef. So we'll see how that comes up again, the sharing of water. We're going to keep our ears peeled for that idea. The Mani holy men. Mani is a Hebrew word that means God is with us, and we are told that they are holy, so we know there's some kind of religion, spirituality going on within that group. I'm picturing men in robes living in huts out in the desert, perhaps. We also get mention of the man Jesus, which I love here. The man Jesus, we know Jesus. Is this the same guy as the Jesus that we know? We don't call him the man Jesus, but it seems like a pretty good fit for the world that we have been introduced to, and indeed kind of solidifying that idea that this is a harsh world. The man Jesus is somebody who is grounded in this world. He's got the desert dirt and dust, sand on his feet. His skin is probably pretty leathery. He's scrounging for whatever he can eat. And we do know that the Jesus with which we're familiar did spend some time alone in the wilderness before he was tempted by the devil and then went out to preach. So our Jesus and the man Jesus perhaps have more in common here than what we know. But we're not given any more than just that term, the man Jesus. And our protagonist is not a follower of the man Jesus, for what that is worth. Outside of this series, Kef doesn't have a meaning, but keft, add a T to the end of that word, and now we've got something. And we will find that as we learn about Ka in this chapter and later Ka-tet, that some of these words are linked back to ancient Egypt. And thematically, it seems to be not an exact match, perhaps, but pretty relevant and related. So I want to share what I found about keft with you. So this is defined as a ghost, a spirit of someone not able to get to the afterlife. So that's the definition of keft. A ghost or a spirit not able to get to the afterlife. And did you read the opening excerpt? I hope you did, because in this deep psychological dive, we're going to be looking closely at what those things are and why did Stephen King choose them. And this one, Thomas Wolfe, Look Homeward Angel, is setting up the entire series. This is what he chose. I don't believe it's in the unrevised edition. I don't think there's anything that opens up that book. Those were written as serials, remember, in Sci-Fi magazine, as I talked about in the introduction to the series. But when he revised this, this is the excerpt that he chose. And he chooses song lyrics. He loves the songs, poems, excerpts from fiction to set up a chapter or a section or the whole book, or in this case, the entire series. So we are going to read this and keep our ears peeled for anything that seems to be thematically related to this opening. So this is Thomas Wolfe, Look Homeward, Angel. A stone, a leaf, an unfound door. Of a leaf, a stone, a door. And of all the forgotten faces, naked and alone we came into exile. In her dark womb we did not know our mother's face. From the prison of her flesh have we come into the unspeakable and incommunicable prison of this earth. Which of us has known his brother? Which of us has looked into his father's heart? Which of us has not remained forever prison pent? Which of us is not forever a stranger and alone? O lost and by the wind grieved ghost, come back again. Wow, that's great. And I did buy a copy of Look Homeward, Angel, which I haven't read yet because I'm busy doing this, but I can't wait to read it because this is an amazing author in his own right. But we feel that idea of ghost being reflected in the idea of Keft, and we are prisoners of this earth. We're going to think about being a stranger and alone, which I think we're already getting the idea about our protagonist, the gunslinger, as definitely being alone out in the desert, which feels, I mean, it's huge and expansive, but he's stuck in the desert. He's been there for many months, we're told, following the man in black. He doesn't know who the man in black is. He's never seen him face to face. He's finding his campfire every night, but the campfire's long dead. He doesn't know how far ahead of him this man is, so very mysterious. He takes a break, the gunslinger, and considers that dizzy spell that he had when we opened the book. And he's asking himself some pretty big questions here, which are setting up this character for us and the conflict of this character for this book, at least, if not the entire series. So I want to read this. He sat down and allowed himself a short pull from the water bag. He thought of that momentary dizziness earlier in the day, that sense of being almost untethered from the world, and wondered what it might have meant. Why should that business make him think of his horn and the last of his old friends, both lost so long ago at Jericho Hill? He still had the guns, his father's guns, and surely they were more important than horns or even friends. Weren't they? The question was oddly troubling. But since there seemed to be no answer but the obvious one, he put it aside, possibly for later consideration. He scanned the desert and then looked up at the sun, which was now sliding into a far quadrant of the sky that was, disturbingly, not quite true west. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so that lost from that opening statement. We have our gunslinger talking about his friends were lost, the horn was lost. Jericho Hill sounds like it wasn't a great time. His father's guns. And we were given a very in-depth, detailed description of these guns as the book opened. We spent some time on what they looked like and felt like and maybe even smelled like. I don't remember, but we paid a lot of attention to those guns. And here he is questioning those guns, his father's guns. Which of us has looked into his father's heart, his father's guns? And this troubles him, as well it should, because a gunslinger who's questioning his guns feels like an identity crisis to me, Who am I? Are these guns the most important thing? Yeah, right? They are. Right, guys? I mean, they're not more important than the horn or my friends. Right? That's big. That's a big thing that he's kind of asking himself, and he doesn't like it. This troubles him. He's not quite sure what to do with it, though. He doesn't spend a lot of time exploring it. He notices it, and he's like, that feels bad, and just pushes it aside. How many times do we do that when something uncomfortable comes up within us about ourselves, questioning ourselves, our identity? Who are we? What are we doing here? These are big questions. Also, this is a sun setting in a sky that's not quite true west anymore. So that adds to this feeling of disorientation, wobbly, dreamlike kind of situation. So our gunslinger is questioning his guns, and I want to throw the question out for discussion. How does Stephen King feel about guns? He's written this book, The Gunslinger. We've paid a lot of attention to these guns. Now our main character is questioning these guns. So what is Stephen King trying to tell us about guns in this story and perhaps the series as a whole? So keep that in your mind as we're reading this book, and we'll talk about it later. The gunslinger takes a break. He's going to go to bed. He burns devil grass. We don't know what that is. So some of these things, the Mani Holy Men, Kef, the devil grass, where are we? What is this place? We don't recognize what's happening here. So we don't know where he is or when he is. He makes a fire out of the devil grass. And this is a little dangerous because it's the only thing he can burn. There's nothing else out in the desert but the devil grass. And it creates a hallucinogenic smoke that's bad. Bad hallucinogenic smoke that is nightmare devil dreams. And he tries to lay downwind from it, but I think it says he gets a little bit in there because it's going to happen. And as he does, he's flashing back to the last hut dweller. He's remembering, dreaming, and we're going to get the story of the last hut dweller that our protagonist met before moving into the desert. This was a man named Brown, and he had a pet bird named Zoltan. So, Brown is a name that means brown. It's brown hair, brown skin, brown clothes. But through a biblical lens, I did find a little bit more than that. So let's dive in. The surname Brown literally means brown, and probably originated referring to someone with brown hair, complexion, or brown clothes. Okay, we got that. But when we look through a biblical lens, brown, a seemingly ordinary color, bursts forth with significance. In numerous biblical instances, it underscores the value of humility, earthliness, and fertility, and our human imperfection. So that's a good fit. So this man Brown is a farmer. He is of the earth. I think he has red hair, but he is trying his best to grow corn, and he is growing it. So there is some fertility here. Human imperfection, I don't know about that so much. We do have the gunslinger wondering if this man is a demon or the man in black in disguise, or is he just really a man? So something there, perhaps. Also, Robert Browning wrote Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came, which we have talked about in the introduction as an influence on Stephen King writing this book. And I'll do another episode that's all about that poem. Zoltan is his pet bird. Zoltan is a Hungarian name that means sultan. However, we're going to look a little more deeply because this is a Stephen King novel, and I did come up with some pretty fun things here. Zoltan, Hound of Dracula, was an alternative title for a movie called Dracula's Dog, which is a 1978 American horror film. And I've never seen this. I didn't know about it, but I would put money down that Stephen King has watched this film and pulled the name Zoltan from that movie. So we should watch it together sometime, 100%. Zoltan is also the name of the fortune-telling machine And we see this fortune-telling machine in the movie Big. So if you look up Zoltan the fortune teller, you'll see that machine that we see in Big. Now, I believe they changed the last letter so that the name on the machine is Zoltar. I don't know if that was a copyright thing, who knows, but Zoltan is what that machine is usually called. So if we want to think about Zoltan the bird as some kind of horror beast from the Hound of Hell, Hound of Dracula, and or as a fortune teller, I think that could be fun because he does talk. And he didn't have to talk, but we have a talking bird here who is saying things, and it's not just nothing that Stephen King is putting birds into the word's mouth. Reverse that and you get what I'm trying to say here. What does this bird say? Well, Brown is trying to teach him to say the Lord's Prayer. So here we have another biblical name drop, and we go, oh, okay, the Bible, the Lord's Prayer, that's the Our Father who art in heaven. But Zoltan doesn't want to learn that. He's repeating things like beans, beans, the musical fruit, which gives us a little bit of comic relief in this book that's not too funny at this point. And screw you and the horse you rode in on. Our protagonist didn't have a horse, but he did have a mule. Screw you and the horse you rode in on, and that horse, mule, dropped dead as soon as they rode into Brown's hut. So what does that mean for the gunslinger? I don't know. He's also going to later repeat something from the Lord's Prayer, which we will talk about. Brown's wife was of the Mani folk. So there's that word again. We're getting a lot of Bible spirituality just kind of layered up now at this point. We don't know if Brown is of the Mani folk, but it seems likely, at least he knew about it and was married to somebody of that type. And next we're going to get our first mention of Ka in this book, which I mentioned earlier. King writes, "The gunslinger looked up startled. The shaft was about 15 feet deep, easy enough for Brown to drop a rock on him, break his head, and steal everything on him. A crazy or a rotter wouldn't do it. Brown was neither. Yet he liked Brown, and so he pushed the thought out of his mind and got the rest of the water God had willed. Whatever else God willed was Ka's business, not his." So mention of God here. So the gunslinger having some idea of God willing water to him, and he's down in the well. I should have said that before I started reading. Whatever else God willed was Ka's business, not his. So God and destiny, it feels like Ka is some kind of fate, destiny, what God wills for us. Those things are linked together in the context of this passage. Ka will be coming up again in this story, so I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about it so that we can keep our listening ears open when we hear it. I'm going to go back to that official Stephen King dictionary to see what he had to say about it. Again, no spoilers for the series here, and again, I wouldn't recommend that you go look because you will be spoiled. Like many words in high speech, Ka has multiple meanings, and so is difficult to define precisely. It signifies life force, consciousness, duty, and destiny. The closest terms in our language are probably fate and destiny. In the Vulgate, or low speech, it also means a place to which an individual must go. Okay, so we're kind of confirming fate, destiny, but it also signifies life force. So there's that idea again. So that sharing of water, sharing of force, the thing that binds us all together is here again. Consciousness. that's huge. That's all there is. So ka is a big idea here. Duty, destiny, a place to which you must go. The high speech and the low speech. The high speech we're going to hear more about when Nort starts talking in that tongue. And it's reminding me a bit of High Valerian if you watch the Dragon show. So this special language that only the higher ups know. And we'll get more about that when we meet our friend Nort. So Ka is an ancient Egyptian idea, and it signifies the life force or vital essence of someone. The Ka, the Ba, the Ak are things we're going to talk about. The ancient Egyptians believed that the soul was made up of many different components. I think 9, don't quote me on that. We're not going to talk about all 9, but just the ones that felt relevant to this story. And Ka is one of them. Individual's life force or vital essence. That's a dead ringer for the things that we've been talking about. Life force, vital essence. It's often visualized as a twin of the person. So if you have a painting of me in ancient Egypt, there's a double of me next to me. That's my Ka. That's my life force, my vital essence. And it's believed that that remained in the body. After this body died, my Ka remained alive. And that's why you would bring me offerings after I died. That's why you're mummifying my body, because I have to reunite my life force with my individual personality in a way that works to get me ascended to the Ak. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'll explain it as quickly and understandably as possible. So my body dies, mummified, I need that later, and my life force remains alive but needs energy to stay alive. So in ancient Egypt, there would be a slit created at the entrance to tombs where you would bring fruit and flowers and just offerings. And I couldn't eat the fruit, but I could take its life force and grow my life force. So strengthening my Ka as I'm making this journey into the underworld. Are you with me? Ka can be symbolized also as a pair of upright arms. And that's showing the symbol of an embrace, the sharing of your life force with another. So Ka is something that is to be given and shared back and forth. And that also sounds familiar to what we were talking about in terms of the sharing of water with Kef, with these people that were bound with by destiny. So pretty cool things there. The Ba, let's talk about the Ba. The Ba is the part of the soul that makes up the personality. So the life force, the soul, the spiritual essence was the Ka, and the Ba was the personality of the individual, characteristics that make me unique to other people out there. Depicted as a bird with a human head and thought to be able to move freely between the worlds of the living and the dead. So rituals at death were intended to help provide the Ba a safe passage to the underworld. The bird body with a human head, okay? We heard about the Tahin, which is the human body with a bird head at the start of the story. We don't know anything else about the Tahin, but we did get that mention, and we did have this bird, Zoltan. So I'm paying attention a little bit and saying it's an opposite, but close enough for government work, as King likes to say. And then if I could kind of get my spiritual shit together and get my heart weighing less than a feather, right? I could keep going. I don't have to get stuck in the afterlife or come back and repeat the cycle. I can just move on to ascended immortality. And that aspect was called the Ak. So that's what happens if I make it. I have this ascended state of shining immortality. So that's the Ka, the Ba, and the Ak in ancient Egypt, which I feel like are sharing some ideas of what's happening here in this story. What do you think? What do you think? Whoever wrote into the Kingslingers about the Ka, I want you to be listening to me and talk to me about what you know about this. But anybody who knows about ancient Egypt and more about these things, please, please, please get with me and tell me what you know about it and what you think, and if this is a good match. I feel like it is, at least on my surface level knowledge and exploration of ancient Egypt. I'm no expert by any means. So back to Brown and Roland in Brown's hut. They're going to eat dinner. King writes, Brown surprised him again when they sat down to the blanket that served as a table by asking a brief blessing. Rain, health, expansion to the spirit. Do you believe in an afterlife? The gunslinger asked him as Brown dropped 3 ears of hot corn onto his plate. Brown nodded. I think this is it. So funny, a little bit more comic relief here, but then we're kind of like, wait, is he joking? Is this a half joke? What's happening here? At the same time as they're eating, now we get Zoltan remembering part of the Lord's Prayer and busting out with this line as they're eating. King writes, Lead us not into temptation, Zoltan said suddenly, apocalyptically. The gunslinger started as if he had been shot at. He was suddenly sure all this was an illusion, that the man in black had spun a spell and was trying to tell him something in a maddeningly obtuse, symbolic way. Lead us not into temptation. That is kind of a creepy line in that poem, but the gunslinger started as if he had been shot at, and he's a gunslinger, so that's a big reaction from our protagonist there, and described as apocalyptically. So that's supposed to get your attention there. What does it mean? I don't know, but we're paying attention here. We have our protagonist again kind of questioning himself and not really feeling sure about what he should do in the situation. He wants to tell the story of Tull, which will be our third flashback, but he's not sure how to get started. He feels weird about telling it. And King writes, I started to tell you about Tull. Is it growing? It's dead, the gunslinger said. I killed it. He thought of adding, and now I'm going to kill you, if for no other reason than I don't want to have to sleep with one eye open. But had he come to such behavior? If so, why bother to go on at all? Why, if he had become what he pursued? So big identity stuff here again. He wants to kill this man and feels like maybe something that he has done in the past. I don't want to have to worry about you. You're creeping me out. The bird is creepy. You're probably some kind of demon. I don't get it. I'm just going to murder you. But he doesn't say that, and he doesn't do it because he's saying, wait a minute, if I am acting like that, then I'm just as bad as my baddie, as the guy that I'm chasing. And then who am I if I'm doing that? If I'm becoming what I pursue, then what? That's not good. Not good. So some deep psychological digging there. And we can kind of empathize with that on our path to whatever we're trying to do, and sometimes just getting caught up with the ultimate vision of it and losing track of ourselves in the meantime, and losing track of some of the decisions we're making and the way that we're acting in pursuit of our goal. It's good to stop and just make sure you're feeling in alignment with yourself, you're being your genuine self, and you like the person that you're turning into. We see the gunslinger getting super weird about the story, and he's like, I gotta go pee, and I can't get started, and it's a weird, anxiety-laden, awkward kind of thing happening. Finally, Brown is like, just tell me. He invites him to tell the story, and that's where our protagonist can get started finally. So now we're moving out. So we have the gunslinger, the story, and then we moved into Brown's story, and now we're moving into Tull, the story. So third flashback here, and this is where the gunslinger walks into the town of Tull. King writes, the sun had set an hour earlier, but the gunslinger had continued traveling, guided by the town glow in the sky, then by the uncannily clear notes of a honky-tonk piano playing Hey Jude. The road widened as it took on tributaries. Here and there were overhead spark lights, all of them long dead. I love the Beatles. They're my favorite group ever. And so when I was reading this for the first time, I died. And I was like, wait, what? The honky tonk in the middle of the desert is playing, well, not in the middle of the desert, at the edge of the desert is playing Hey Jude. How? Why? Where are we? When are we? Exactly. And spark lights, that's electricity, but it doesn't work anymore. So it was there, but it's been long dead. So again, lots of questions as to where and when we are exactly. But they have the Beatles there, so I'm with it. We're brought into the town of Tull. It's old, weathered, beaten down. It's not nice. The people there are awful, not nice. The gunslinger finds the local saloon called Sheb's, and Sheb is the piano player. We'll meet him. We meet Allie and Nort, and I want to talk about their names because I found something cool for all of them. Sheb Wooley was an American actor, singer, and writer, and he appeared in many films and TV shows. Here's some of the movies that he starred in. Rocky Mountain, High Noon, Giant, War Wagon, The Outlaw Josie Wales, and Hoosiers. So one of these things not like the other, but most of those sound like Westerns to me, and they were in the 1950s when Stephen King was growing up. So I feel like this is a nod to Sheb Wooley. The protagonist, the gunslinger, is in the bar. He meets Allie. She's tending bar. She's giving him a drink, something to eat. He starts eating, and Nort comes up behind him. So Norton is an Old English name that means North Town. So not too much there, but Andre Norton was an American science fiction author. And just for funsies, Stephen King uses the name Norton a few times in his book. So we see Warden Samuel Norton in Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. And Susan Norton is the girlfriend in Salem's Lot. Andre Norton, though, the American science fiction author, isn't actually Andre Norton. He is actually a she, and she is Alice Andre Norton. So Alice Norton was a science fiction writer who took on pen names. One of them was Andre Norton. She was the first woman to be Gandalf Grand Master of Fantasy and inducted into the Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame. She defended acquisition of The Hobbit to the whatever library she was working at. I don't know why that is a controversial book. If you know why The Hobbit would be on a do not read list, let me know. But she has written more than 300 published titles and writing for 70 years. So Stephen King absolutely knows who this is, has read her writing, and using the name Alice, Allie, and Nort, I feel like is a big nod in this direction. So super cool finding there when I dug around a little bit. So Nort is not cool though. He's actually pretty gross, and he's actually dead. He is addicted to devil grass. He was smoking it and then he started chewing it, and it's really bad for you. So it killed him. He just keeled over dead one day, but was resurrected by the man in black, which is going to be the fourth story within a story here. But the gunslinger doesn't know that yet. He just has this awful man coming up behind him when he's trying to eat his burgers. King writes, "He turned around and stared into the face of the man who had been asleep by the door when he entered. It was a terrible face. The odor of the devil grass was a rank miasma. The eyes were damned, the staring, glaring eyes of one who sees but does not see. Eyes that have turned inward to the sterile hell of dreams beyond control, dreams unleashed, risen out of the stinking swamps of the unconscious. The woman behind the bar made a small moaning sound. The cracked lips writhed, lifted, revealing the green, mossy teeth. And the gunslinger thought, he's not even smoking it anymore. He's chewing it. He's really chewing it. And on the heels of that, he's a dead man. He should have been dead a year ago. And on the heels of that, the man in black did this." And he's right about that. Nort now starts talking to the gunslinger in the high speech, which we heard about in that definition of ka. And it takes the protagonist aback in such a profound way that we have not really seen anything do up until this point, not even Zoltan. King writes, "The high speech. For a moment, his mind refused to track it. It had been years, God, centuries, millenniums. There was no more high speech. He was the last gunslinger. The others were all..." So this is a weird exchange, but just to say that the gunslinger hasn't heard this in a long time. How long? Is he using hyperbole here? Centuries, millennium. That's a long time, but it's quite shocking to him that he's hearing not only the high speech, but coming out of this man who is a dead man. It's weird, and everybody in the bar is freaked out because they've never heard the high speech. The gunslinger's like, "I'm the only one who knows this. I'm the last gunslinger, and nobody else knows what this is." And they don't. They're just like, that man is speaking in weird tongues, and they know that he was dead, so they are like, "We're out of here." Allie gets really mad because all of her customers have just been driven away. And the gunslinger doesn't care. He's like, "The man in black did this, and you know what happened, and you're going to tell me." And she's like, "Sure. You have to have sex with me first, though." And the gunslinger's like, "Okay, sure. I need this information." He's considering the proposition for a minute, though, and we get another mention of ka. King writes, "And she'd been once pretty, maybe even beautiful. Not that it mattered. It would not have mattered if the grave beetles had nested in the arid blackness of her womb. It had all been written. Somewhere, some hand had put it all down in Ka's book. He doesn't care if the grave beetles had nested in her womb. I would care about that. That sounds pretty gross. Maybe my standards are too high. Ka's book. So what is that? It feels like the Akashic Records, which is the book of everything that's ever happened. And if you talk to the right person or can get yourself into the right state, you can access the Akashic Records, Ka's book. But in any event, the gunslinger's like, this is happening. It just is. So they do have sex. And the gunslinger wants his share. King writes, "The man in black," he said. "You have to have it, don't you? You couldn't just throw me a fuck and go to sleep." "I have to have it." And I love that because we're talking about sex and most people are, I have to have it sex, but this guy has to have the information about the man in black. The sex is like, yeah, whatever, we're doing it, fine. Tell me about the man in black. Desperate for that information, wanting that information. So we move into the fourth story within a story, and we get to meet the man in black through the eyes of Alice. She tells the story of Nort being resurrected or touched by God, as she puts it. King writes, "He might have been a priest or a monk. He wore a black robe that had been flowered with dust, and a loose hood covered his head and obscured his features, but not that horrid, happy grin." So he's dressing like a priest or a monk, or at least that's the impression that Allie got from him. He denies this. She asks him and he says, no, he's not. She's also aroused by him. So she's sexually aroused by this man. So she was with Roland. She is also with the man in black. And we don't know if this is just who she is and where she's at in her life, or if it's something about the big energies that these characters are bringing to the table. When the man in black orders another whiskey, he says, "Once more, please," with feeling, as they say in the world next door. In the world next door, is he moving between worlds? It sounds like it. And what does that mean? And how is he doing it? Is it a thing in this place? It doesn't seem to be, because Allie doesn't know what he's talking about. But it does seem to be something that he can do. So we're paying attention. He starts telling her about hell and about how Nort went to hell, and she probably didn't think she was going to have to experience the afterlife until she died, but now she can, because he's there to show her some things, and this is getting really weird and dark, and she doesn't like it. And King writes, "Get out of my place." She felt a trembling loathing spring up in her, but the warmth still radiated from her belly. "It's all right," he said softly. "It's all right. Wait, just wait." The eyes were blue. She felt suddenly easy in her mind, as if she had taken a drug. "Dead as anybody," he said. "Do you see?" She nodded dumbly, and he laughed aloud, a fine, strong, untainted laugh that swung heads around. So he's hypnotized her in some way. So he has some kind of hypnotizing power just by looking into his eyes. We're getting some level, some clue of the level of his power. And now we see it is much bigger than just that, because he does resurrect Nort. He spits on him, he's leaping over him in handstand springs that are not really human, something that a human could do, at least not very easily. But nobody could raise a man from the dead except the man in black does. And Alice runs upstairs, and when she comes back down, he's gone. The man in black is gone. Nort is alive and just kind of sitting there. Nort has a note from the man in black. The note says, "You want to know about death. I left him a word. That word is 19. If you say it to him, his mind will be opened. He will tell you what lies beyond. He will tell you what he saw. The word is 19. Knowing will drive you mad. But sooner or later, you will ask. You won't be able to help yourself. Have a nice day." And he signs it Walter O'Dim with a smiley face. Walter is a masculine name of Germanic origin that means army ruler or powerful ruler. The root word Walt means power and Hari means warrior, and together they create the word meaning commander of the army. So powerful ruler, army ruler. Okay, he's got some power. We don't know about an army. It just seems to be him. But I'll buy that for Walter being a name of great power. And it has this aggressive feeling when we talk about the ruler of the army. So that feels like a fit to me. The gunslinger stays in Tull for a few days, and we wonder, why does he stay in Tull? He's supposed to be pursuing the man in black. He's worried that this man is getting away from him. So there's no reason for him to stop and stay in Tull for a few days. There's nothing here. It's awful. Why is he staying in Tull? The people are terrible. They're not nice to him. Well, he has Allie, and they're having a lot of get-together sessions, and he must be craving that connection, that little bit of love that he's finding in his time with her. That's the only reason I can think that he's staying here, is because he craves that love and connection, as do all of us. Unclear, though. But he does start kind of thinking, okay, I need to figure out what's my next move. He's about to cross the desert. What's on the other side of the desert? Nobody really knows. Nobody knows. But the local preacher woman is alleged to have come from the desert. So he thinks, okay, so she can tell me what's on the other side of the desert before I set out there. This is Sylvia Pittston. She is a large woman with a lot of presence. She is a Bible thumper. We're going to hear a lot more about the Bible when the gunslinger goes to watch her sermon. So he's standing in the back of church in the shadows watching her preach. And King writes, this is Sylvia Pittston preaching. I love the story, and I love the players in that story. I have walked arm in arm in the lion's den with Daniel. I stood with David when he was tempted by Bathsheba as she bathed at the pool. I have been in the fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I slew 2,000 with Samson when he swung the jawbone, and was blinded with St. Paul on the road to Damascus. I wept with Mary at Golgotha. These are stories that we know, and so we're kind of solidifying that the Bible in this place, whatever it is the same as our Bible. She says there's only one person she does not know, from the Bible, and that is the interloper. And she runs through the Bible stories featuring the devil, ending with, "It was him who took our Lord up on the mountain. It was him that tempted him and showed him all the world and the world's pleasures. It's him that will return when last times come on the world. And they are coming, my brothers and sisters. Can you feel they are? It's him that will come as the Antichrist, a crimson king with bloody eyes, to lead men into the flaming bowels of perdition, to the bloody end of wickedness. As star wormwood hangs blazing in the sky, as gall gnaws at the vitals of the children, as women's wombs give forth monstrosities, as the work of men's hands turn to blood." It's fantastic, isn't it? And people in the church are falling down and yelling, and it's quite a scene. She then sets up the interloper as the gunslinger. She's kind of saying, would you know the interloper if you saw him? Would you know him if he were walking down your main street? This stranger, this interloper. And everyone's like, yeah, we know that guy. We're going to take care of him. So she's really setting up what's to come. As she is preaching, the gunslinger feels pretty sure that the man in black has left a demon in her, that this is maybe not how she's always giving her sermons, although, I don't know, maybe she's just really good at this. But the gunslinger's like, no, there's a demon in her, and this seems to be her story, because he's going to go visit her after church, or maybe the next day, I'm not sure, but he goes out to see her because he wants to know what happened with the man in black and what's on the other side of the desert. And we get a really weird scene that happens at this point in the book. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? So the man in black has left a demon inside of her, and she's talking about carrying the Crimson King's baby. And the gunslinger is like, well, this sounds like you know the man in black, and that this has somehow created a demon child, I guess. Really ironic, because she was preaching about the only one I don't know is the interloper, but in fact, in that biblical term of knowing, she did indeed know him. And she's also preaching about the wombs giving forth monstrosities, and that's what seems to be the condition of her womb at this point. So funny irony here. The gunslinger puts an end to this through use of his gun. He ends the demon pregnancy. What do we think about this? Tell me what you think about this in the comments. Don't get my page shut down, please. I think it's hard to say if this is a real pregnancy. And even at the end of the scene, she's like, there's no more baby, it's dead. And the gunslinger's like, there never was. So was it just a mystical pregnancy? Like, what really happened? I mean, I guess I believe that she was with the man in black. How big a demon is he if he's gonna create a demon baby? A lot of questions here and not a lot of answers. The scene, when it happens, I always have to go back and reread it and reread it and reread it. What just happened there? Ultimately, I think if we're going to look at the bigger scope of the story, we don't have to get too into anatomy and what happened physiologically here, but more this aggressive act of the gunslinger against this woman. It is a very uncomfortable scene. It is very forceful. it does make us feel a little weird. And so we see something in this man that we don't like. Did he have to do that? Was there really a demon baby? Did it have to be handled that way? So we're kind of feeling weird and cringy about it. And I think it's setting up what's to come, though. So his act of aggression is really the trigger point for the town turning against him, and then the ultimate act of aggression and murder. So it's just kind of like these little dominoes falling down. We have this smaller act of aggression, of murder, I don't know, turning into this bigger act of the townspeople turning on him, trying to kill him, and then him just massacring all of them. So I'm kind of looking at it in that way. This is probably, gosh, there's a lot to come in this story, but this is one of the more controversial scenes in this story. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. After all of that happens, he's like, I'm getting out of here. I'm leaving. Bye-bye. But it's too late. The townspeople are ready to spring on him. He goes back to Sheb's to try and he packs up some things. Allie's not there. He doesn't see her. He's leaving, walking down the main street, and the people come out and start running at him. They don't have any guns. He does, of course, the gunslinger, and we get our first action sequence in this book. And, oh, by the way, we, of course, moved back out of Allie telling the story of the man in black. So now we're back in Tull, moving back out of these stories. And they are attacking him with forks and knives and boards and all kinds of weapons, whatever they could find, but he just blows them away. And we see how good he is at what he does. This is where we get his name. This far into chapter 1, almost the end of chapter 1, his name is Roland. We stopped wondering what it was. We didn't know what it was, and we were just like, oh, the gunslinger, the gunslinger, the gunslinger. We're identifying him with his guns, not as a person, not as a human being, not until he sacrifices Alice, not until he kills this woman that he loved. The only reason he's staying there is because he has some kind of affection or longing in his heart for connection. That's it. That's all I can come up with. And he kills her. And she's the one that reveals his name to us. That's not an accident. Sheb is holding her hostage. He's got a knife or something to her neck, and he's like, I'm going to kill her if you kill me. But she says, kill me, Roland, kill me. I said the word 19. I said, and he told me, I can't bear it. So she's asking to be sacrificed here. He shoots her without hesitation. There's no conversation, nothing. Boom, dead. And then he kills everybody else. We hear about the tricks of his hands, so his fingers know their tricks and they're just reloading on muscle memory. He doesn't have to think about this. He knows how to kill 40 people or whatever it is. And he walks away without too much trouble. He got a little bruised. He got a couple of cuts. There's a deeper one on his calf, but no big deal. Nothing that he can't deal with on his own. And that's it. Everybody's dead. The whole town. Men, women, children. Boom. That's big. And he's finishing up this story. We're going to move out of Tull and back into Brown's hut. He finishes talking and he thinks Brown has fallen asleep, much like he thought, or Allie thought that the gunslinger, Roland, had fallen asleep when she was telling her story. So there's a lot of parallels here that I'm not going to bring up every single one, but really, really amazing, cool writing throughout this series. Just one little example of that. So he thinks Brown has fallen asleep and he's like, okay, I guess I'll go to sleep. Just as he's about to do that, though, King writes, Brown said, there, you've told it. Do you feel better? The gunslinger started. Why would I feel bad? Roland, why would you feel bad? You just murdered 40 people. Even if you are a gunslinger, we don't really know what that is. We're not sure at this point. We're feeling like probably more than just a shoot 'em up Jesse James kind of person, but we don't really have any idea. Is it just somebody that murders the whole town and walks away? That's heavy. That's big. In any event, you would have some kind of feeling about just murdering people, even little kids, even if they were trying to kill you. So why would I feel bad? It's so funny. And also, you were like hemming and hawing. You couldn't tell this story. You had so much trouble speaking it. So there was some kind of psychological resistance there to telling him what you did. So the whole thing is just hilarious. Why should I feel bad? Unless he's trying to be funny, but he doesn't seem like a super funny guy. So we think, okay, you're doing some deep deception inside of yourself here. You can't even see it. Brown can see it, but you can't even see it yourself. But we're starting to see it, and we know that he's starting to question himself. So we'll be on the lookout for that. Brown continues talking to him about the man in black. King writes, "I think you're very close to your man in black," Brown said. "Is he desperate?" "I don't know." "Are you?" "Not yet," the gunslinger said. He looked at Brown with a shade of defiance. "I go where I have to go. Do what I have to do." "That's good then," Brown said, and turned over and went to sleep. Why is he being defiant and defensive? Brown was just kind of making conversation about the man in black. But the gunslinger Roland is like, I have to do this. I have to do these things. I had to kill all of those people. Defiance. There wasn't a real need for that here. So there's something inside of him that's feeling defensive and defiant about who he is and what he's doing. That is the end of Brown's story. So we come out of Brown's hut back into the desert. So we moved 4 stories in and then moved back out. So we're back just to the story of the gunslinger, and that is where chapter 1 ends. So much fun, such a great way to start a story by just moving backwards in time. Super cool, very good writing. We've already got some things that we're thinking about, some really big ideas. We've seen that the Bible, religion, Christianity, Old Testament religion is coming into play here in quite a few examples in this story. We also have mention of holy, or Mani, the holy men. We don't know who that is, but that feels like some kind of influence perhaps on what's happening in this world. We don't know when or what this world is. Is it our world? Is it a long time ago? Is it in the future? Is it not our world at all? No answers there, but pretty big questions. And then we have our main character, Roland, looking deep inside of himself and asking himself, who am I and what am I doing? And desperate for answers about that, desperate for answers from anyone, from Allie. I have to have it. Tell me about this man in black. It's what I'm doing with my life. I have to do it. I have to. Defiant, defensive. These guns are the most important thing, right? Right, guys? It's great. It's a great setup for what's to come. Tell me if you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for liking and subscribing and interacting with me here. Come back for chapter 2, The Way Station. I will be back to talk with you about chapter 2. Until we meet again, my beautiful Dark Tower friends, long days and pleasant nights.